welcome to the humble beginnings of a tool that I'm calling Spriter. Let's start with what Spriter is and what it is not. It is a tool for creating animated characters, effects, and objects, any animated thing within a 2D game. What it is not is any kind of competitor for Flash. It does not support vector art. It's all about loading in bitmap images and combining and manipulating them to create frames for your animations. This is a method that goes way back to the early days of console games. Excellent examples would be games like Rayman for the Jaguar and PlayStation 1, Vector Man for the Genesis, things of that sort. It goes back a lot further than that, but originally the idea was, instead of having entire frames of animation as whole images, what you could do is create an animated character by using the same little bitty images of body parts and simply changing their positions. This saves a lot of file space and a lot of RAM or heap, which was why it was used so commonly in the old days. And just to show you what I'm talking about here, you see this this character here, and this character, if I click here, you can see that his head is a separate object, as are all of his other parts, his shoulder pads, his sword, his feet, and so on. And just by taking those same images and changing their position, and in this case their rotation a little bit, you can create entirely new frames of animation. In this case very subtle, but you could actually make something drastically different looking with the same images. And therefore, instead of each image being a large, fairly large file for the entire image, now each frame can simply be a little bit of text defining what images to use, where they go, and whether or not they're rotated, things of that sort. That's what this tool is for. Not only, as I mentioned before, is this method of animating extremely efficient for saving file space and memory, there are a lot of other pretty remarkable benefits for this method of animating that I felt I should mention. One other potentially huge savings is in time, and not just time for the artist in creating all of the different animations and characters and all of that. Time in iterating. Let's say, for instance, that the artist has begun animating a character and has quite a few animations done, and then suddenly, for some reason, the developing team decides that they really need to change the design of the character's head. In this case, with this animation method, as you can see from, if I drag around on this window here, there's only one head image. So literally I could go back to my art program like GIMP or Photoshop and change that one head image, and suddenly every last animation, when I go back into this tool, every last animation is updated with the new head. So not only do I have the savings of heap space and memory, but I have this huge savings of time. I don't have to go in as the artist and make the adjustments or make the change, whether subtle or drastic, to literally hundreds or thousands of head images within full frame animations. I change that one image and boom, it's done. That's not all. Another potentially huge savings of, again, time, file space, and memory is of character variations. Now let's say you're working on a game where there's multiple variations of a character, or for example, the character throughout the game can collect new items, weapons, power-ups, armor that all have a visual effect on the actual character. Because each image is modular, you can use methods of replacing or not drawing specific parts depending on situations. So within this tool, I've created an incredibly simple but extremely powerful mode of controlling that sort of thing and predoing it, called character maps. And what a character map does is allows you to basically filter what parts of the image will be drawn while you preview your character. And this information can be brought into a game engine and duplicated. So not only do you have incredibly efficient creation of the initial animations of a character, but incredibly efficient creation of all of the variations of the character. And for this to make more sense to you, let's say, for instance, we'll just do something simple here. Let's say, for instance, this character has a magical item that can turn himself into metal or stone, for instance. I've created a character map called Gray. And what that character map does is it tells the program that every image that is in the folder called char1 should be replaced by a same named image from a folder called char1 gray. So as you can see, you didn't see this because I did it outside of the recordings, but there's a whole other folder called char1 gray with all identical images except they've been made grayscale, just for the sake of demonstrating how this works. And I created a character map called Gray, and when you create a character map, you have a list of all of the folders for your project, and you have the basically the visibility status, we'll call it, of any particular folder. And in this case, if I click on char1, that's a folder char1, and in this case its visibility is set to char1 gray. That means any image that's being taken from char1, instead see if there's an same named version of that image in that folder char1 gray. So that's one example, but it doesn't obviously have to just be different colored versions of the same image. You could have a totally different head with a helmet in a folder called helmet head, and switch the regular head folder with helmet head, and suddenly the variation of your character with the helmet is a mouse click away and almost no data. Incredibly powerful, rating all of the variations of a character you're going to need. Same thing with swords. You can have a different folder for each sword, and they don't all have to be swords. Obviously, it could be an axe or something like that. And let me just mention one other thing that's very powerful is, let's say, for instance, the character can eventually get a cape. What I would do in that case is animate the entire character with the cape in all of his frames, and then I would eventually have a folder called cape that I would have all my cape images in, and I would double click on that cape folder and I would choose visibility no for the default setting of the character, and then when I create a character map for when he has the cape, I simply say yes, now display the images from the cape folder. I hope that makes sense. I'll go into much more detail with the char map later in a more instructional video, but that's just another one of the incredible features and savings in using this form of animation.